Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm an experienced American tutor. I will be helping you get through the mathematics past questions of the joint admission and the matriculation board examination. I hope you enjoy my tutoring. Thank you.
Question 1 just wants to know which question paper type of the mathematics you have, and so you would just do whichever one you have, and in this case it's A, and so you would just fill that in. Okay, so here we have question 2, and it says convert 72 base 6 to a number in base 3. So before we start converting it into base 3, we need to convert this 72 base 6 into a base 10 that we can work with. So I've written that process out over here. Here we have 72 base 6, and so we're going to break it up. Remember that since it's in base 6, it's going to start from the right, 6 to the 0 power, then 6 to the first power, and it would move on if there were more numbers. So for the first, we're going to take 2 times 6 to the 0, and for the tens place over here, we're going to do 7 times 6 to the 1. So then this will be 7 times 6, which is 42. This will be 2 times 1, which is just 2. Then you're going to add those two, and this is 44, and remember that it's technically in base 10. That's why I wrote the little 10 down there. Okay, now we can go through this process. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take that 44, you don't have to write the base 10 anymore, it's not necessary, but you're going to take 44 and divide it by 3. That could happen 14 times, and you'll be left with a remainder of 2. And so you just leave that 2 alone. Then you take that 14, this answer that you got, and you're going to take 14 divided by 3. That would be 4, right? Because then that would be 12, and you'd be left again with a remainder of 2. Again, you write down the 2, you leave it alone, you take this answer that you got, and you work with it down here. Now we're doing 4 divided by 3. That can only happen once, and you'll be left with a remainder of 1. We leave the 1, and we work with this answer that we got, the 1. So now, we're doing 1 divided by 3. That obviously doesn't work, so you're left with 0, remainder 1. And now you've exhausted your options. You can't go any further. So your answer is going to be, remember that you read these going from bottom to top, so it would be 1, 1, 2, 2. And that's your answer right there, and that would be D. Alright, so here we have question 3, and it wants us to simplify 2 and 2/3 times 1 and 1/2 over 4 and 4/5. So I've rewritten the problem, just as it's written up here, but I've outlined the numerator in green and I've outlined the denominator in purple. And I went on to show my work for the numerator and the denominator in separate places, just so that you could see separately what's going on. So the first thing you want to do is convert all of these into improper fractions instead of mixed numbers. That'll make it much easier to work with. So starting with this, the numerator, 2 and 2/3 converts to 8/3. And so the way I did that was I said 2 times 3 is 6 plus another 2 will make 8. And you leave it over the original denominator of that fraction. So we have 8/3. You do the same process over here. 1 times 2 is 2 plus 1 is 3. And you leave it over this denominator. So now it's 3/2. We multiply, and to multiply fractions, it's very straightforward. You multiply just as it goes, so 8 times 3 is 24, 3 times 2 is 6. And then, working with the denominator, we're going to do the same thing and change this into an improper fraction like this. So 4 times 5 is 20, plus 4 is 24, so we're left with 24 over 5. Then we're going to go back and rewrite it. So the original problem asked us to take these two multiplied and divide it by this. So these two multiplied is 24 over 6, right? There's the 24 over 6. Then it says to divide by the denominator, which was this, 24 over 5. So that's what that is right there. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to change it so that we can easily do the math here. So dividing fractions can be kind of tough, but we can easily change it over by making this division sign into multiplication sign and flipping these, or taking the reciprocal. So So now instead of 24 over 5, we have 5 over 24. And so 24 over 6 times 5 over 24, you can cancel the 24s and you're left with 5 over 6 as your answer, which was C. Alright, question 4 wants us to evaluate 21 divided by 9, or 21 ninths, to 3 significant figures. So basically we're going to try to get as close as we can, and then we're going to start working with decimals. So we can't just leave it in terms of what they call remainders. We're going to add a few zeros here just in case we need them. So 9 into 21, the closest we can get is 2. So that'll be 18. Then the difference between 21 and 18 is 3. We can bring down the 0. So 9 into 30. The closest we can get to that is 3. And I'm going to rewrite the decimal right as this comes up. So 9 times 3 is 27. When you do the math, the difference is 3. We bring down this 0. And 9 into 30, and so we're doing the same thing we just did. So this will be 3, this will be 27, it'll go on and on and on. The thing is, they only want it to 3 significant figures, which is where we're at. So this is our answer, 2.33. Alright, so question 5 tells us about a man who earns this much per month, and then out of that he spends 15% on his children's education, and then he spends this much on food. So how much will he have left? So what we're going to do is first we're going to figure out how much he spends on his children's education. So this is 3,500. And he spends 15% of it on the education. So you could either do times 0.15, which could get tedious, or you can just do 15 over 100, right? Because percent means out of 100. So this means that you can cancel these zeros here. And you're left with the problem of 35 times 15. Okay, we can do that. Times 15. So 5 times 5 is 25. Bring up the 2. And then I'll work over here. So then 5 times 3 is 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 3 is 3. So we're going to add this up. We're going to get 4, we're going to get 525 is our answer for how much he spends on his children's education. So then the next step is to figure out how much is he really spending in total for the month. He also spends an additional 1,950 onto these 525. So 1,950,525. We line them up and add 14. So now we have this much that he spends in total per month. So we're going to subtract that from how much he makes, and that should leave us with what the question asks, which is how much does he have left? Okay, so we're going to need to do some borrowing. We're going to make this 4, make this 10, and then this becomes a 9, and then this becomes a 10. So 10 divided by 5, or excuse me, 10 minus 5 is 5, 9 minus 7 is 2, 4 minus 4 is 0, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So we're left with 125, which would be your answer right here. Alright, so question 6 gives us numbers with a lot of exponents. It has 27 to the x plus 2. This is a divided by sign. So divided by 9 to the x plus 1 is equal to 3 to the 2x. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make this 9 and this 27 change a little bit. So add b to the third power times x plus 2, right? This 9 can be rewritten as 3 squared times x plus 1, so leaving that part the same. And we'll leave this as 3 to the x plus 2. Now that we have this, we can work with this division symbol and these 2 3s. So we can just leave it as 1 3 out here. We distribute this, and we're going to have 3x plus 6. And now since we use division, we're going to end up having minus 2x and y. So we look up to 2. And all of that is equal to 3 to the 2x. Just 1 3 over here, but you're not doing anything else to it except for doing an exponent. And 1 3 over here, same with the x, you can cancel it. Now we're left with 3x plus 6 minus 2x minus 1 is equal to 2x. And it gets pretty straightforward from here. So 3x minus 2x is just 1x, and we leave it as x, plus 6 minus 1 is 5 is equal to 2x. And we're going to get minus x, and we're going to have 5 is equal to 2x minus x is equal to x. And let me double check. Oh, right here. I know I made a mistake. Right here. 2 distributed to the 1. I said I distributed it, but I didn't do it. So this is actually a 2. This is 6 minus 2. Making this 4. And this 4. There we go. So 4 is equal to x. Sorry about that. And your answer is B. Question 7 asks us if the log base 3 of x squared is equal to negative 8, what is x? So the first thing you're going to want to do is use the laws of logs to rewrite this. So I rewrote it here. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take this small number, the log base 3, and take it to this exponent. So 3 to the negative 8 is equal to what was inside, which is x squared. So taking a negative exponent is the same as saying 1 over 3 to the 8th. So now we're taking 1 over 3 to the 8th. But what is 3 to the 8th? If you don't know that off the top of your head, which I didn't, you can just multiply it out. So this is me showing my thought process. There's 8 3's written out here. I know that 3 cubed is 27 at least. I could have tried to figure out what 3 to the 4th is and went on from there, but I just took it at this. And then, so there's another 3 cubed, that's 27, and we're left with these last 2 3's, and that's 9. So I started by multiplying the two 27's, and you end up with 729. Then you multiply that by 9, and then you end up with 6,561. Then, remember that you are solving for x squared. So let me see if I can't move this down a bit. So what's happening is, now we know that 1 over 6,561 is equal to x squared. Since we want to know what x is, we're going to have to take the square root. And so I just took the square root of 6,561, and that happens to be 81. So how did I arrive at my answer of 81? Well, I started by looking at my options. I know it's not going to be 3 because 3 squared is 9. 9 squared is 81. 27 squared, I did the math over here, that was 729. I'm left with trying 81. When I tried 81 times 81, I found out that my answer was going to be 6,561. And I'll let you do the math and figure that for yourself. But yeah, so then that helped me figure out what the answer was, and there it is. X is going to be equal to 1 over 81. That's your option D. Alright, so here we have question 8, and it wants us to simplify these two quantities. And so the first one is the square root of 6 plus 2 squared, and the second one is the square root of 6 minus 2 squared. And you're subtracting the two. There's two ways you could do this. You could say that this is a difference of squares, as you can see, and then you could pull this out and pull this out to be their squares and so on and so forth. But I found it easier to just go ahead and take the mean literally. So since it's this quantity squared, I wrote it out squared, and this quantity squared, I wrote it out squared. And so now all we have to do is find out what these are. So this would be the square root of 6 times the square root of 6 would just be 6. Then we'd have 2 root 6, and another 2 root 6 would make 4 root 6. And lastly, we'd have plus 4. Over here, we'd have, again, 6 for the first part. Then we'd have negative 4 root 6. And then we'd have plus 4. Don't forget to distribute this minus sign. So we're going to relieve this first part. So now it'll be minus 6 plus 4 times the square root of 6 minus 4. So you'll notice that this 6 and this negative 6 will cancel each other out. And this 4 and this negative 4 will cancel each other out. And you're left with these two, which will add up to 8 root 6, which would be your answer C. It got cut off a little bit, but that would be your answer. Okay, so question 9 asks if P is a set of all prime factors of 30, and Q is a set of all factors of 18 less than 10, find P intersection Q. So what you're going to do is first figure out what P and Q are. So it says that P are the prime factors of 30. So what that means is if you were to factor out 30, you'd put 1 here and 30 here. You would have 2 and 15. And you would have 3 and 10. And you would have 5 and 6. And you've pretty much closed the gap there. And so it wants the prime factors of this. So you know that 2 is a prime number, 3 is a prime number, and 5 is a prime number. All of these others can be factored further. So, and remember that prime number is a number that can only be factored into one in itself. So, there's our set for P. Q wants to be the factors of 18 that are less than 10. So we do the same thing for 18. Write out 2 and 9, and then 3 and 6, and then we can't do 4 or 5, so this is it. And it wants us those that are less than 10. And so I guess that would actually include 1, 2, 3, 6, and 9. Anyway, the whole idea is that we need to take P intersection Q. And so that means that what does this mean? What is this whole intersection? Remember, this is intersection, not union. If it was a union, we would just combine the two sets and be done. But intersection, we want only the numbers that are in common between the two sets. And so that would be the numbers 2 and 3. So P intersection Q is going to consist of 2 and 3. And that will be your answer. Alrighty, so for question 10, it says in a class of 46 students, 22 play football and 26 play volleyball. If 3 students play both games, how many play neither? So I'll do a little diagram. It's not like the best one, but it might get the job done. So the whole class consists of 46 students. This is obviously not drawn to scale because 22 would be closer to half, but 22 of them are in football and 26 of them are in volleyball, and 3 of them overlap. So what happens is, well, the mistake that many people will do is they'll try to add these two and subtract that from 46, and they'll find that it doesn't work. So the thing is, since 3 of them are included in both sports, we have to take that out of one of these two numbers, excuse me, so that we're not double counting those same 3 students. So we'll leave the 22 by itself and assume that those 3 students are accounted for here. Then we'll subtract 3 out of 26 to get the other 23 students on that team. 22 plus 23 is going to be 45. And an extra dot. Okay, so it's 45. So that means that only one student is not included in either of the sports. So your answer is A. Question 11 wants us to make n the subject of a formula if W is equal to V times the quantity 2 plus Cn over 1 minus Cn. So, I'm going to start off by rewriting the problem. 2 plus Cn over 1 minus Cn. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this denominator. And the way that I'm going to do that is multiply both sides of this equation by the value 1 minus Cn. When I do that, the bottoms will cancel over here. And so now I can rewrite the problem as 1 minus Cn times W is going to be equal to V times 2 plus Cn. The next step would be to distribute this W among this part over here. So now it would be W minus CNW is equal to V times 2 plus Cn. So then, remember that we're trying to get the N. And so there's one of them. And there's the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also distribute the V over here. So now we have 2V plus CNV. Now I can mess with these two very easily. So now I'll have W minus 2V is equal to positive CNW plus CNV. Now both of these have an N in common, so I can pull that out. W minus 2V is equal to N times CW plus CV. So now I can divide both sides by this. And so I'm going to have W minus 2V over CW plus CV is equal to N. And so you notice that you have C in common on both of these, and C is on the denominator. So you can simplify this to saying W minus 2V over W plus V times the quantity 1 over C is equal to N. It's W minus 2V over W plus V. So that looks like this one. Okay, so question 12 wants us to find the remainder when 2x cubed minus 11x squared plus 8x minus 1 is divided by x plus 3. And so since we're just looking for the remainder, there's actually a simple, fast way to do this. And it's to first find the 0, or the x value that would make this 0. So in this case, if x were negative 3, then this value would be 0. So we're going to use negative 3 and plug it into these spaces for x over here. So 2 times negative 3 cubed minus 11 times negative 3 squared plus 8 times negative 3 minus 1. So this will be 2 times negative 57, just 27. This will be minus 11 times positive 9 plus negative 24 minus 1. So now we have this will be negative 54 minus 99. This will be minus 24 and then minus 1. And then so to do quick math, negative 99 and negative 1 will make negative 100. And negative 54 and negative 24 will make negative 78. So now we have negative 178, and that's your remainder. And that is option D. So question 13 is essentially asking us to do a system of equations. We have two equations. We have x squared minus y squared is equal to 4. And we have x plus y is equal to 2. So what you're going to want to do is use one of these to define one of your variables. So I'm going to say up here, I'm going to say that x is equal to 2 minus y. So I subtracted y from both sides, and I used this equation to come up with this one. Now I can substitute x with 2 minus y. So going over here on the side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 2 minus y squared, and that will stand in for my x, minus y squared is equal to 4. And so now we'd have to multiply out this over here. So I'm going to rewrite this just so you can see the work process. So this would be 4. This would be minus 2y, and then plus y squared. And so I'm going to write y squared minus 4y plus 4 minus y squared is equal to 4. And so now I'm going to go ahead and solve for y. So this positive y squared and this negative y squared are going to cancel each other out. Also, I'm going to subtract this 4 from both sides, and essentially they're going to cancel each other out as well. So now I'm left with negative 4y is equal to 0, and which basically means y can only be 0. So y is 0. We know that much now. So the next step would be to use this to solve for x. And so we can go back to this original equation, this one. So remember, x plus y is equal to 2. So now we know that now we know that y is 0. We can just say x plus 0 is equal to 2. So we know that x is equal to 2. So your answer is going to be C. So 14 says, if y varies directly as the square root of n, and y equals 4 when n equals 4, find y when n is equal to 1 7/9. So the first step you want to do is realize what it means when y varies directly as the square root of n. So what that means is that y is in some way proportional to the square root of n. And so I'm going to put this constant, which will give me the exact proportionality that these two variables share. So they told us that y equals 4 when n equals 4. Now what we need to do is figure out what k is to make this equation true. So 4 is equal to k times the square root of 4, which is 2. So then we would divide by 2, and we'd get 2 is equal to k. Good. Now we know what the constant is. So now we can rewrite our equation. Now we know exactly how much y varies. It's by 2, a factor of 2. So now they want us to figure out what y is when this is n. So all we have to do is plug in, essentially. First, I'm going to convert this 1 7/9 into a mixed fraction, or sorry, an improper fraction. So 1 times 9 is 9, plus 7 is 16. I'm going to leave it over 9. So there it is as an improper fraction. And so now I want to say y is equal to 2 times the square root of 16 over 9. And when you're taking the square root of a fraction, you can divide it up like so. So now you have y is equal to 2 times the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 9 is 3. So it's 2 times, let me rewrite that, 2 times 4/3. And so now that we know that, we can just go ahead and times 2 times 4/3, which is 8/3, because you multiply straight across when that's your answer. So question 15 tells us that u is inversely proportional to the cube of v, and that u is equal to 81 when v is equal to 2. and they want us to find what u is when v is equal to 3. So the first thing we want to do is recognize what it means to be inversely proportional. So inversely proportional means that instead of directly proportional, where the constant would be multiplied by, this time you're going to divide, not by the constant, well, you're going to take the constant and divide it by whatever it is of interest. So they said the cube of v. That's why I put v cubed. So this is our constant up here, and this is our v cubed, and that's our u. And they tell us that when u is equal to 81, that happens when v is equal to 2. So I just rewrote this using the numbers that they gave me. So I'm going to simplify by saying this is 81 is equal to k over 2 cubed is 8. Then I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. So then I'm going to be left with k is equal to 81 times 8. So let's do the math over here. That would be 8, and that would be 64. So we have 648 is equal to k. Going back to the equation that we came up with over here, now we know that u is equal to 648 divided by v cubed. So they want to find u when v is equal to 3. So that's u is equal to 648 divided by, they said they want v to be 3, so I'm going to take 3 cubed. So now we have u is equal to 648 divided by 27. And so I'm going to try to get as close as I can. So 648 divided by 27. And, well, let me think here. Okay. Well, let's give it a shot. Well, let's try one of the options they give us to see how close we get. So let's try 24. So 27 times 24. And so I start from the bottom corner. 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 2 is 10. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So there's our 8, there's our 4, and there's our 6. So look at that. 24 is our best answer there. So that's going to be u. So u is 24, and the answer is A. So question 16 wants us to find the value of y. And it just wants us to make the equation that they have set out to be 2, or the inequality, I should say. So they have 1/5 y plus 1/5 is less than 1/2 y plus 2/5. So the best way to go about doing this is to first find the least common denominator for all of these fractions so that they are much more easily comparable. And so I would say that the least common denominator is 10. So I'm going to change all of these fractions so that the denominator is 10. So 1/5 would now become 2/10. And same thing with this 1/5 over here. To get 1/2 to be converted into something out of 10, I would put 5 out of 10. And then the same thing happens over here, or the same process. So I'm trying to get it to be over 10. And so I have to take 5 times 2, so now I'm going to take 2 times 2. And so here we are, here's our new fractions. And now, since the great thing is that since all of these have the same fraction, or same denominator, we can ignore the denominators and just make this 2y plus 2 is less than 5y plus 4. And that's because they're all proportional. It's like comparing apples to apples. You're comparing the same thing now. So now we can easily solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and I'm going to take 2y less than 5y plus 2. And then I'll go ahead and subtract 5y, so 2y minus 5y is less than 2. 2y minus 5y would make negative 3y is less than 2. Then I'll go ahead and divide by negative 3. But remember that when you divide by a negative number, only if you're dividing, what you're going to do is you're going to take y is greater than, so I change the sign. Y is greater than negative 2/3. And that will be your option C. Question 17 wants us to find the range of values which satisfy this inequality. And so the first thing I went and did was found the zeros, and so the zeros would be m equals 3 and n equals 4. And so I have those on there, but I also went and looked at negative 3 and I guess technically negative 4. And so what you want to think about is what happens when you choose certain values. So what I mean by that is, if I choose a number that is, say, less than 4, what will happen? So let's say I chose to use the number 1. That means that I would then take 1 minus 3, which is negative 2, and I would take 1 minus 4, which is negative 3, and I would multiply them and I would get positive 6. That would not be less than 0. And so that was with the number 1. So let's try it again with, say, a number that's bigger than 4, like, say, 5. So then I would have 5 minus 3, 2. And then I'm going to take 5 minus 4 on the other side. And that's obviously just 1. And I get positive 2. So what's going on here? Well, any number that's smaller than 3 is obviously smaller than 4. That means that you're going to get a negative here when you do this math, and another negative here, which means you'll end up with a positive here. So any number smaller than 3 is a no-go because it's not giving you a value that's less than 0. So that's anything that's less than 3, up until 0 at least. And so what about between 0 and negative 3? Then what happens? Okay, well, when we choose the number, say, negative 2 minus 3, so what you're going to get is negative 5. And negative 2 minus 4, that's going to be negative 6. And then you're going to get a positive again. So it still works out when you go further and further into the negatives, because if you take a negative and subtract from it, you're just going to get more and more negative. So it's not working. So it looks like anything less than 3 is a no-go. But what about greater than 3? Let's try, say I tried 3.5. So 3.5, let me use some of my scratchbook. 3.5 minus 3 times 3.5 minus 4. Let's see if I can erase this. Okay, so 3.5 minus 3 would be just 0.5, which, mind you, is a positive number. And I would take that and multiply it by the negative 0.5 that I get here. Regardless of what these numbers come out to be, my answer is negative. So above 3, I will get a negative answer. But what happens when I reach 4? Or above 4? Because when I reach 4, I get 0, and that's not less than 0, that's equal to 0. So 4 is not going to be inclusive. So what about if I use the number 5? Well, 5 minus 3 is obviously a positive number. 5 minus 4 is a positive number. And so you're going to get a positive answer. And so that is not less than 0, obviously. So once you're above 4, it doesn't work anymore. The only numbers it's going to work for are the numbers between 3 and 4. So that means you want m to be less than 4 but greater than 3. So that would be your answer right there. Question 18 wants us to find an equation that represents the shaded region. And so remember that the equation of a line can be represented by y equals mx plus b, where b is your y-intercept. So, looking at this line, we can see that our y-intercept is 4. This is an equality, not necessarily an equation, so we need to figure out which one of these inequalities will work best. And so we have this line with this gradient, and the line is bolded. And also the area underneath it has been shaded. So that means that it's going to be less than because it's underneath, or equal to because it's bolded. So y is less than or equal to, we don't know the gradient yet, but we do know the y-intercept, and we said that was 4. Now, looking at the gradient, it's going in a downward slope. That means that it's going to be a negative gradient. Then we just need to figure out what the value of the slope is. So I'll erase some of my lines here, or the value of the gradient. So here we have the point 0, 4, and here we have the point 1, 0. So remember that it's rise over run. So the rise is represented by the y value, so 4 minus 0 over, and then we take the corresponding x value. So since we used 4 first, we'll use the 0 first, and then the 1, and then we get negative 4. And like I said, it was going to be negative, so that's our answer, and that happens to match option C. Question 19 wants us to find the sum of the third and fourth terms using this sequence, n squared plus 6, minus 6n minus 4. So the third term would just be simply plugging in the number 3. So we'd have 3 squared minus 6 times 3 minus 4, which would be 9 minus 18 minus 4, which ends up equaling negative 13, as I got right here. For the fourth term, you'd plug in the number 4. 4 squared minus 6 times 4 minus 4, and that would give us negative 12. When we look at the question, remember that it asks us to find the sum of these two, so then you would add them and get negative 25, and that's your answer. So question 20 wants us to find the ratio of this sum to infinity of a geometric progression. And it tells us that the sum itself is negative 1/10, and that the first term is negative 1/8. And so I've used this equation, which assumes that the absolute value of the ratio is going to be less than 1. And so essentially what I've done is I've just plugged in what I know. So I know that the sum is negative 1/10, and I've set that equal to the first term, that would be my a, over 1 minus r, and we're solving for r. The first thing I did was I multiplied both sides by the quantity 1 minus r. That allowed me to get rid of the denominator over here and put 1 minus r over here. Then I multiplied this negative 1/10 by 1 and by negative r. So I distributed it between this quantity, so I got negative 1/10 plus r over 10 is equal to just negative 1/8. And then to get rid of these denominators over here, I multiplied everything by 10. So I said 10 times this side and 10 times this side. This is gone with this and this because it cancels these two out. And over here, I'm left with negative 10 over 8. So now I have negative 1 plus r is equal to negative 10 over 8. I would add 1 to both sides, to get rid of it on this side and move it over here, and this way r is by itself now. So here's r by itself, and I have negative 10 over 8 plus 1. I have r is equal to negative 10 over 8 plus 8 over 8 next, because 8 over 8 is the same thing as 1, and it allows me to work with this fraction over here. And so that would mean that I would be left with r is equal to negative 2 over 8, which when reduced, that's negative 1 over 4. And so you can't see it well, so I outlined it, but your answer would be B.
Question 21 asks about a binary operation, star, and it says that it's defined on a set of integers such that p star q is equal to pq plus p minus q. And then it wants us to find the answer for 2 star parentheses 3 star 4. So essentially what they're doing is they're giving us this new rule, which is this, and they're seeing if we can follow our normal order of operations. So parentheses are obviously going to be the first thing that we're going to do here. So we're first going to evaluate what 3 star 4 is. So P will be 3 and Q will be 4. So first off, we're going to multiply 3 and 4, 3 times 4 because it's PQ, plus P, which is 3, minus 4. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 would be 15, minus 4 is 11. And then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to do 2 star 11. Because now that we've done this section, it's this. So we just do the same thing. We go 2 times 11 now, plus 2 minus 11. And let's see what we get. 2 times 11 is 22, plus 2 minus 11. So 22 plus 2 is 24, minus 11, 13. And so that's our answer. So question 22 tells us a binary operation on the set of real numbers is defined by m star n is equal to mn over 2 for all m and n that are real. So if the entity element is 2, find the inverse of negative 5. So what they mean is they want our values of m and n to be negative 5 and the inverse of negative 5. So we can write that over here. I have negative 5 here, and then I have the inverse of negative 5 here. So I just took it to the negative 1 for an exponent. And then the operation tells us that we want to divide by 2, so I divided by 2. They already told us what the answer is going to be. The identity element has to be 2. So you look at this and you think, okay, I have this all written out. There's all numbers. What do? I can't solve for a variable, or where do I go from here? Well, what they want is find the inverse of negative 5. So what we're going to do is literally we're going to isolate negative 5 inverse. So what we would do is we would start by multiplying both sides by 2 so we can get rid of the denominator. So we're going to be left with 4 after I've multiplied by 2 on this side is equal to negative 5 to the 1 to negative 1 times negative 5. And so I have now a little bit closer, but remember I want to isolate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. That way it cancels over here. And now I'm left with 4 over 5, and it's negative. So negative 4/5 is equal to negative 5 inverse. And so basically that's our answer. They wanted to find the inverse of negative 5 when the identity element was 2. So our answer is negative 4/5. So question 3 gives us the matrices and sets them equal to each other, and they want us to find the value of x. So it's not going to be too hard. I'm going to rewrite it for clarity over here. It's equal to 3, 4, 5, and 5. And so what we're going to do is we're going to multiply first downwards and diagonal, so this is 10, and then we're going to subtract the other one, 3x. Do again over here, and this is 20. And now we're just going to solve for x. So 15 minus 20 is negative 5. And I'm going to subtract 10x, or sorry, just 10, subtract 10, and I'll left with negative 3x, and then this is minus 10. So negative 3x is equal to negative 15. I divide by negative 3 on both sides, and I'm left with x is equal to 5. And that's my answer. Alright, so question 25, they want us to calculate this angle x, or SUT is the correct. And so what we're going to do is first we have to know what they told us here. QR and TU are parallel. And so that means that there's going to be some properties that we can apply to them. So these two are parallel, and there's this line that goes through them. Alright, so that creates this angle right here, this 80 degrees. Because these lines are parallel, that means that if this line were to cross here, this would also be 80 degrees. So I'll label it 80. So now we can call this a triangle, right? This is triangle SUT now. And well, we have one of the angles, but what about the other two? Well, we know that since this is a straight line, this PS segment, PST, I guess, and we know that this angle is 95, we can figure out what this angle is by adding up to 180, since that would make the straight line. So 180 minus 95 is going to give us 85. That's all in degrees. So now we know that this angle is 85 degrees. So now we know two of these, we can easily find a third one. Remember, the angles inside of a triangle will add up to 180. So what we're going to do is we're going to say 80 plus 85. And so this will be 5, and this will be 16. And so what's left to get us all the way up to 180? Well, that's 15. Because 180 minus 165, this becomes 10, 1, and that's 0. So 15 degrees difference, and that is our answer. Alright, so here we have question 26, and it gives us the angles of a polygon. The 4x got cut off, so I just scribbled it in there. But the angles of a polygon are x, 2x, 3x, 4x, and 5x, respectively. And they want us to find the value of x. So I've counted how many measurements they gave me, and they gave me 5 of them. So assuming that this is all of the angles that there is going to be in this polygon, I said that since this has 5 angles, it's going to be 540 degrees. And so I'm just going to add these all up. X plus 2x plus 3x plus 4x plus 5x is equal to 540. And so, lucky for us, there's only one variable, so this is going to make it fairly simple to find our answer. So we just add up how many x's we have. 1 plus 2 makes 3, plus 3 makes 6, plus 4 makes 10, plus 5 makes 15. So we have 15x is equal to 540, and I'll double check my math. 4 and 5 makes 9, plus 3 makes 12, plus 2 makes 14, plus x makes 15. Okay, good. So then I would divide by 15. So 540 divided by 15, 3, and go to 45. So this will now become 4, and this will now become 14. 14 minus 5 is 9. And so how many times can 15 go into 96? And so that got us the answer a little bit faster. So our answer would be D. Question 27 gives us this diagram and tells us that the center is O, and it wants us to find angle QRP. And so this is x, and actually x is 90 degrees. and that's because it's an angle inside of a semicircle. And so to find the other angle, you might be tempted to just say, well, it's also 90. But the correct answer would be B. You would have to do 90 minus x to get your answer. So question 28 wants us to find the area of the trapezium. And so remember that for the formula for area for this type of shape is 1/2 times a plus b times the height, where a and b are these two bases, you call them. So 1/2 times 7 plus 13 times 6. I'm going to simplify by doing 1/2 times 6, which is 3. And 7 plus 13 adds up to 20, so 3 times 20 will be 20, 40, and then 60, so it's 60 centimeters squared. Question 29 tells us that a circular arc subtends an angle of 150 degrees at the center of a circle with a radius of 12. So they want us to calculate the area of the sector of the arc. So what is this area? They want to know. So remember that the area of a circle, the entire circle, is pi r squared, or in our case, pi times 12 times 12. And then we know the amount of area covered in degrees. It's 150 degrees out of the total 360. So if we take that portion, that fraction, 150 divided by 360, and then multiply it by the full area of the circle, that should leave us with only the area of that arc that we're interested in. And so what you're going to do is a series, after you set this up, is just a series of simplifications. So remember that these zeros can cross out. They'll cancel by a factor of 10, and you're left with 15 over 36 now, times pi times 12 times 12. 12 can go into 36 3 times, so this cancels into 1, and this cancels into 3. So now we're left with 15 divided by 3 times pi times only 1/12, because the other one was taken care of already. So the next step would simply be to just divide 15 by 3, and you get 5 times pi times 12, and 5 times 12 is 60, so you're left with 60 pi centimeters squared, since it's area. So question 30 asks us to calculate the volume of a cuboid, and it gives us the length, the breadth, and the height. So I drew a diagram to illustrate the measurements that they gave us. And remember that when you're finding the volume of a cuboid, you want to multiply those three measurements. And so I started by multiplying two of them, the 0.76 and the 0.82. You can start with any two sides, just start multiplying. And so I chose to start with 2 to make it simpler, since these are decimals that we're working with. If it had been like 7, 2, and 3, I could have multiplied very easily just straight across. But anyway, so here's 0.82 times 0.76. I'll take you through the math real quick. 6 times 2 is 12. Bring up the 1. 6 times 8 is 48, plus 1 is 49. So I put down 49, and then, okay, that one comes in later. Then I went on and I put a 0, and I did 7 times 2 is 14, 4, bring up the 1, 7 times 8 is 56, plus 1 is 57, so I put down the 57, and then I went and added. This was 2, this was 13, this was 12, and I put up the 1, and 1 plus 5 is 6. And since there's 1, 2, 3, 4 significant numbers after the decimal point to worry about, I put down decimal and after 4 numbers. And so I moved on, and I used this to multiply by the next number that I had not used yet. And so I did 6 times 2 is 12, bring up the 1. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 1 is 19, bring up the 1. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13, bring up the 1. And 6 times 6 is 36, plus 1 is 37, bring up the 1. Then I moved on, so I put a 0 down. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 6 is 12. And then I went on and added, and I got 2, 13, this was 10, and this was 12, this was 6, and then this was 1. And then I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers behind the decimal points, and so I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I put down my decimal point. And so we're only going to worry about these first 3 numbers, That's as far as they want the decimal points to go out to. And remember that this is volume, so it's going to be in centimeters cubed. So your final answer is D, 1.62 centimeters cubed. So, question 31 tells us that the locus of a point equidistant from the intersection of lines, and it gives us two different lines, 3x minus 7y plus 7 equals 0, and 4x minus 6y plus 1 is equal to 0. And so, first you really have to understand what the question is asking. Locus of a point equidistant from the intersection of the lines. So, really, you could take any two lines. Here's a line, and here's a line. And I'll use a different color to show exactly where they intersect. They intersect right there. So a point that's equidistant from the intersection of the lines can easily be represented, see if I can get, oh, there we go, by a circle. A circle will, anywhere you go on the circle, anywhere you draw a dot on that circle, will be equidistant from the from that intersection. So these 2 points that are on the circle are equidistant from the intersection. So it's this one and this one. All of these in comparison to each other are equidistant from the intersection of the 2 lines. So a circle with the intersection as its center. That will be your answer. Question 32 says that the gradient of the straight line joining the points, and it gives us 2 points, and they want us to find the gradient. So remember that the gradient is given by the difference in y over the difference in x. And so I chose to start with -7 as my first y, and then minus -3. And then remember, whatever you start with, you also have to do the same thing on the bottom. So the corresponding pair number is 5. So I'm going to do 5 minus -2. And then, so now that I've gotten that written out, I can simplify. So -7 plus 3, because we have 2 negatives here, and 5 plus 2, again, same reason. And so -7 plus 3 is going to be -4, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So your final answer is C, -4/7. Question 33 asks us to find the distance between the point 4, 3 and the intersection of these 2 lines, where one of them is y equals 2x plus 4, and the other one is y equals 7 minus x. So first we need to find the intersection of these 2 lines. And to do that, we simply make them equal to each other. So 2x plus 4 is equal to 7 minus x. And so this will tell us when they intersect. And the reason why that works is because here you have a coordinate plane, and let's say you have 2 lines. Where they intersect is where the x value is the same and the y value. And so that's why we set them equal to each other. So now we're going to go ahead and solve for x. So 2x plus 4 is equal to 7 minus x. So I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add x to both sides. And so that will leave me with 3x plus 4 is equal to 7. Then I would subtract 4 from both sides, and then I'm left with 3x is equal to 3, so that x is equal to 1. So now I can take that and plug it into one of these equations. I'm going to use this one since it's more simpler, and that will give me my y value. So it's 7 minus x, so 7 minus 1, since we know x is equal to 1, so that's 6. So our point, our ordered pair, is going to be 1, 6, because remember it's in x, y form. So now we know that point, and so it wants us to find the distance between the point 4, 3 and the intersection that we just found. So now we have to use the distance formula. And so I've written it up here. So the distance formula is going to be the square root of x1, so I'm going to use 1, minus x2. Let me write down the other point that they gave us. It's 4, 3. So 1 minus 4 squared plus, and now I'll do the same thing with the y's. I'm going to do 6 minus 3 squared. So that's going to be equal to 1 minus 4 is -3 squared plus 3 squared, which means I have 9 plus 9, which is equal to the square root of 18. Now, I can simplify that by saying that that's equal to the square root of 9 times 2. And we can pull that apart, and now we have the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So the square root of 9 is 3, and we leave the other one in place because we can't do anything with that. So our final answer is 3 root 2. Question 34 asks us to find the equation of a line through the points -2, 1 and -1/2, 4. Well, first we need to find the gradient. And also I drew a picture just to illustrate what's going on here. Here's one of the points. This is the point -1/2, 4. I'll label it. And this is the point -2, 1. To find the gradient, we're going to take the difference in the y's over the difference in the x. So 4 minus 1 over -1/2 minus -2. So that simplifies to 3 over 1.5, or 3 over 1.5, and that goes into 3 2 times, so the answer would be 2 for the gradient. Now we need to find the y-intercept, because remember that the equation of the line is y is equal to mx plus b. And so the y-intercept, you can see very clearly from the picture, since the slope, or the gradient is 2, we're going to go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, and there we are at the point 5. And so then that would make our answer right here b. Y is equal to 2x plus 5. Question 35 wants us to find the cosine of 135 degrees. And so at first this looks pretty daunting. You might not know off the top of your head what the cosine of 135 degrees is. But you can use this little trick where you take the negative cosine of 180 minus 135. So this way you have sort of like the complement of this, and all you have to do is make it negative. So the cosine of 45 degrees is much more doable. And so you should know that that's the square root of 2 over 2. And since we made it negative, it's negative root 2 over 2. So our answer is C. A man stands on a tree 150 centimeters high and sees a boat at an angle of depression of 74 degrees. Find the distance between the boat from the base of the tree. So I drew a picture. It's really just a triangle. So a man is standing on a tree 150 centimeters high. So we're going to assume that down here is the base of the tree, and up here is where the man is standing. And he's 150 centimeters up, so I wrote 150 centimeters. And he sees a boat at an angle of depression of 74 degrees. So this is there's this line. The angle of depression is this line. Now, if I were to draw another line, I know that this angle would be 90 degrees. And so the difference would make 16. So this is 16 degrees over here on the inside. And since we know that this is a right triangle, we can make this the right angle. And now this is our angle of interest, and we're trying to find this side length. So remember, there's SOHCAHTOA, there's sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. This is going to be our best option for the information that we have. So the tangent of 16 degrees is going to be the opposite side length, which we don't know yet, over the adjacent side length, which is 150. And so then we're going to solve for the side length that we don't know yet, and then you're going to do the math, and your answer will be 43 centimeters. So question 37 says, if y is equal to x squared minus 1 over x, find dy dx. So they're simply asking us to take the derivative. So I started by rewriting this section into this. This will make it easier when I take the derivative. So the derivative of x squared is 2x minus this negative 1 will come down in front of the x, so that's why I have negative x, and you take away 1 from this, so now I'm left with negative 2. these two negatives will cancel with each other, or in other words, we'll make it into a positive. So 2x plus 1 over x squared, and that's as far as I need to take it. Question 38 wants us to find dy dx if y is equal to the cosine of x. So again, they're simply asking us to take the derivative. So the derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x, and B is your answer. Question 39 wants us to evaluate the integral from 1 to 2 of x squared minus 4x dx. And so the first thing you want to do is just find the antiderivative of the inside. So here we have x squared, and I said that its derivative is x cubed over 3. And you can check that by taking the actual derivative. So x cubed over 3, and so the 3 would come down. This x cubed would come down, and that's where I got the 3. It would become x squared, and remember that it's over 3. So the 3's cancel, and I'm left with x squared. And then for the next one, you would do, it would be 4x squared over 2 was the thing that you started with, and then you would get back to 4x. I simplified, however, and I said 4 divided by 2 is 2, so that's why I left it as 2x squared. Then the next thing is to use the parameters that they gave you. It's going from 1 to 2. So you first solve for using the 2. So 2 cubed over 3 minus 2 times 2 squared, and then you subtract the formula evaluated at 1. So 1 cubed over 3 minus 2 times 1 squared. From here, it's pretty much just straight math. And so you're going to have 2 cubed, which is 8 over 3, minus 2 times 4 is 8, minus this entire quantity, 1/3 minus 2. As you simplify, you'll find that this inside is negative 5/3, and then you can change that to positive 5/3 because it's 2 negatives. And so then from there, you do 8/3 plus 5/3 is going to give you 13/3 minus 8, and I've converted the 8 into thirds. Remember, 24 divided by 3 is 8, so this works. And then you just subtract and you get negative 11/3. And so that's your answer. So question 40 wants us to evaluate the integral going from 0 to pi over 4 of secant squared theta d theta. So remember that the antiderivative of secant squared is tangent, and that's because when you take the derivative of tangent, you're going to get secant squared. And then we just keep the boundaries that they gave us. It's going from 0 to pi over 4. So that means that we're going to plug in pi over 4 here, and we're going to plug in 0 here. And then we want to find the difference. So remember that tangent is the same as saying sine over cosine. So tangent theta is equal to the sine of theta over the cosine of theta. So when I take pi over 4, if I were to take the sine of pi over 4, that would give me root 2 over 2. And the cosine of pi over 4 is also root 2 over 2. If you're more familiar with evaluating these at measures of degrees, pi over 4 would be the same as saying 45 degrees. So going back, also the tangent of 0, well, we would have the sine of 0 over the cosine of 0, and sorry, I should say this is pi over 4 in this case. Over here we're doing of 0, and so the sine of 0 is 0 and the cosine of 0 is 1, but 0 divided by anything is just 0. So I showed my math over here, the root 2 over 2 over root 2 over 2, and we get 1 minus 0, which is just 1. And that's your answer. Question 41 gives us a pie chart. The measurements are 120, 80, and 90, and then this last one we don't know. And they want to know how many students have excellent. So I want to point something out. Just because this says 120 degrees, that does not mean that there's 120 students that passed, because you only have a total of 36 students to work with. So that'll come back in later. So first we need to figure out how many degrees of this pie chart covers the excellent. So the entire circle is going to add up to 360 degrees. So 120 plus 80 plus 90 plus this other x will give us 360. So then we go ahead and solve for x and we get 70. So now we know that 70 is equal to x. But that only lets us know that this is now 70 degrees. That still doesn't tell us how many students have excellent. So the way to figure that out is we need to figure out what portion or what percentage of students are doing excellent. So we have 70 degrees out of the full 360. That'll give us the portion. Then we need to multiply by 36 because that is the original number of students we had to work with. When we multiply the portion times the total number to work with, not the measured of degrees in the circle, this will give us our answer of how many students there are. So I canceled out these zeros, and then I rewrote the problem as 7 over 36 times 36. The 36 will cancel, and I'm left with just 7. So 7 students. And that's your answer. Question 42 includes a bar chart, and it says the bar chart above shows the distribution of marks in a class test. If the pass mark is 5, what percentage of the students failed the test? So I drew a line to represent where the pass mark is. So the pass mark is 5, and anyone who did better than that passed. Anyone who did worse than that failed. Then I counted up how many students, just how many students failed. So this one came up to 2, so I wrote 2. Then I added 3, 4, 6, and 5. And that total came out to 20. But I also need to know the total so I can know the percentage. So the total is going to be those first 20 that I already counted, plus another 4, 6, 5, 1, 3, and 1, which adds up to be 40. So now, in order to get our percentage, we need to do 20 out of 40. This could be a fairly simple process. You could look at it and say, well, that's 1/2. And I know that 1/2 is the same as saying 50%. If numbers weren't that easy to work with, what you would do is first you would reduce this fraction to 1/2, and which is the same as saying 0.5, and then multiply that by 100 so you can move the decimal point over and get just 50%. But yeah, that's your answer. Question 43 tells us that the mean of 7 numbers is 96. And if an eighth number is added, then the mean becomes 112. And it wants us to find that 8th number. So what we're going to start by doing is we're going to say that sum of 7 numbers that you have to make, we're just going to call it x. That whole sum is x. And it's going to be over 7 because there's 7 numbers, and it's equal to 96, as they told us. So I'm going to then solve for x. So x will then be 96 times 7, which I did the math on the side over here, and it's 672. So they said that when we add another term, then it becomes 112. So we added another term here, this one term. It's our 8th term, so we divide by 8, and the new mean is 112. Since I already know x because I just solved for it over here, I can just plug that in. So 672 plus h over 8 is equal to 112. Now I can simplify and solve for h. So the first thing that I did was I multiplied by 8 on both sides of the equation. That way it canceled out here and came over here. I did the math on the side over here. 112 times 8 is 896. So now I know that 672 plus h is equal to 896. All I have to do now is subtract. H is equal to 896 minus 672. I did the math on the side, and it turns out to be h is equal to 224. And so, that's your answer. Question 44 wants us to find the median of this set of data. And so, the first thing that you need to do when you're given a string of numbers and you're asked to find the median is order them from least to greatest. So, I went off and I crossed off every number as I wrote it down so that I wouldn't rewrite numbers or get confused. So, the final string of numbers is going to look like this once it's all ordered. To find the median, you're going to cross off one by one on each end until you reach the very center. Now, one of two things is going to happen when you reach the center. you're either going to reach just one number, and you know that that will be your median, or you're going to reach two numbers because you had an even set. So when that happens, you just average the two numbers. In this case, since they're the same number, the average ends up to be the number that we got for both of these. So the median is 4. Question 45 wants us to find the range of this data. And so all you need to do is find the largest number and the smallest number, and then subtract the two, and that'll give you your range. So your answer is B. Question 46 wants us to find the standard deviation of the set 2, 3, 8, 10, and 12. So the first thing you need to do is find the mean of these numbers, because that's really necessary in finding the standard deviation. So you add all of them up and divide by how many numbers there were, and you'll find that that's 7. So that's your mean. To get the standard deviation, you need to find out how these numbers deviated from that mean. So you're going to do all of these points and subtract the mean from them. So I did 2 minus 7 and 3 minus 7, 8 minus 7, so on and so forth. And for each one of those, you're going to square whatever you get. This way, negatives won't cancel each other out with positives and so on. And you're also going to want to divide all of that added together by 5. So essentially you're finding the mean of the deviation. Then you want to take the square root so that it's really the standard deviation. So moving on, I evaluated these parentheses up here, and I got 25, 16, 1, 9, and 25. You're going to add all of those up and divide by 5. So when you add them up and divide by 5, you'll find that you have 76 divided by 5, which is 15 and 1/5, or 15.2. To get the square root of 15.2, there's the method that I used was I found numbers that were fairly close. So I knew that the square root of 9 is 3, and that the square root of 16 is 4. So the square root of 15.2 has to be somewhere in between there. Looking at my options, 3.9 was the only option that would have matched. So I checked it. I did 3.9 times 3.9, and I got 15.21. So 3.9 is close enough, and that's your answer. Question 47 wants us to evaluate n plus 1, choose n minus 2, and then they give us n is equal to 15. So the first thing you want to do is just plug in 15. 15 plus 1 is 16, and minus 2 is 13. So now we have the problem 16, choose 13. So using the formula for this type of situation, we're going to do 16 factorial divided by 16 minus 13 factorial times 13 factorial. So when you work this out, 16 minus 13 is 3. So now you're left with 16 factorial over 3 factorial times 13 factorial. When you write this out, 16 times 15 times 14 times 13, so on and so forth, this 13, so on and so forth, will cancel. So now you're just left with 16 times 15 times 14 over 3 factorial. And so what you can do, and I forgot to write the extra 1 here, but since it's just 1, it doesn't change the answer. But what you can do is you can simplify. Since this is all multiplication, you can just say 3 goes into 15 5 times, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. So now you're down to 6 times 5 times 7, which can be simplified to 16 times 35. And I showed my math over here on the side. And when you multiply everything out and add everything up, you get 560 as your final answer. And so that would be your option D. Question 48 asks, in how many ways can the letters of the word totality be arranged? And so the first thing you want to do is count how many letters there are. So there are 8 letters total in the word totality. And so you write 8 factorial. If there were no repeats in the letters, you could just leave it as is. However, you'll see that the letter T reappears 3 times. So you have to account for that and divide by 3 factorial. When you write out the factorials, you can cancel out the 3, 2, and 1 from both the bottom and top. And now you're just left with 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4. So you can simplify. 8 times 7 is 56, 6 times 5 is 30, times 4. You can simplify these two, and you will now have 56 times 120, which when you work it all out, turns out to be 6,720. So your answer is A. Question 49 says that the probability that a student passes a physics test is 2/3. If he takes 3 physics tests, what is the probability that he passes 2 of those tests? So the first thing you want to do is write out the different probabilities here. There's the probability that he passes, which is 2/3, as they told us, and the probability that he fails, which is 1/3. So what you're going to do is just write out what would happen for the 3 tests. It doesn't matter order in this case. So on the first test he could pass, on the second test he could pass, but on the third test he has to fail because they only want to know for passing 2 of them. And so you multiply everything out and you will get 4/27. Question 50 states the probability that a man and his wife will live for 80 years are 2/3 and 3/5 respectively, and it wants us to find the probability that at least one of them will live up to 80 years. So using the information that they gave us, they said respectively. So the man, chances that he lives until 80 years is 2/3, and for the woman it will be 3/5. So I've written out here the chances for each of them. So the man, the chances that he lives, as we said, is 2/3, which means that his chances of dying is 1/3 before he reaches the age of 80. And I did the same thing for his wife. One of them is 3/5 and the other one is 2/5. So we need to account for all of the possibilities that could happen if at least one of them lives. That includes the man living, the wife living, or both of them living. So for the first one, I did what would happen if the man lived to be 80 years, but the woman did not. So 2/3 for the man living and 2/5 for the woman not making it to the 80 years. Then I did it the other way around for the woman living and her husband not. And then I did it lastly for both of them living the full 80 years. And so you multiply each individual case and you add the probability of each. So you're going to get 4/15 over plus 3/15 plus 6/15, which is 13/15, and so D would be your answer.